a morsel of the Passover meal and handed it to Judas, instructing him to leave. Joe 13. 21-30 Mark's account also intimates this order of events. Mr. 14. 12-25 During the Lord's evening meal that followed, Jesus passed the bread and the wine to the 11 remaining apostles, telling them to eat and drink. Luke 22. 19, 20 Afterward he spoke to them as the ones that have stuck with me in my trials, a further indication that Judas had been dismissed. Luke 22. 28. There is no evidence that Jesus himself ate the bread thus offered or drank out of the cup during this memorial meal. The body and blood he gave was in their behalf and for validating the new covenant, through which their sins were removed. Joe 31. 31-34. Hajj 8. 10-12. 12. 24 Jesus had no sins. Hajj 7. 26 He mediates the new covenant between Jehovah God and those chosen as Christ's associates. Hajj 9. 15. See covenant. Besides the apostles present at that meal, there were to be others making up the spiritual Israel of God, a little flock, who would eventually be kings and priests with Christ. Hajj 6. 16. Luke 12. 32. Re 1. 5, 6. 5. 9, 10 All of Christ's spiritual brothers on earth, therefore, would be partakers in this meal each time it is celebrated. They are shown to be certain first fruits of his creatures. James 1. 18, brought from mankind as first fruits to God and to the Lamb, and are revealed in John's vision to number 144,000. Re 14. 1-5. Observers not partaking. The Lord Jesus Christ revealed that, at his presence, there would be persons who would do good to his spiritual brothers, visiting them in time of need and giving them otex to acute miritra longo, Lot, I 271 for as a perfect, unblemished sacrifice for sins the next afternoon of the same day of the Hebrew calendar, Nisan 14. He also retained all his blood for that perfect sacrifice. He poured out his soul which is in the blood to the very death. Isra 53. 12. La 17. 11 Consequently, during the evening meal he did not perform a miracle of transubstantiation, changing the bread into his literal flesh and the wine into his literal blood. For the same reasons, it cannot be truly said that he miraculously caused his flesh and his blood to be present or combined with the bread and wine, as is claimed by those who adhere to the doctrine of consubstantiation. This is not contradicted by Jesus' words at John 6. 51-57. Jesus was not there discussing the Lord's evening meal. Such an arrangement was not instituted until a year later. The eating and drinking mentioned in this account are done in a figurative sense by exercising faith in Jesus Christ, as is indicated by verses 35 and 40. Furthermore, eating actual human flesh and blood would be cannibalism. Therefore, Jews who were not exercising faith and who did not properly understand Jesus' statement about eating his flesh and drinking his blood were shocked. This indicated the Jewish view on eating human flesh and blood, as inculcated by the law. Joe 6. 60. Additionally, drinking blood was a violation of God's law to Noah, prior to the law covenant. Ge 9. 4. La 17. 10 The Lord Jesus Christ would never instruct others to violate God's law. Compare Mount 5. 19. Furthermore, Jesus commanded, "Keep doing this in remembrance of me, not in sacrifice of me." 1 Co 11. 23-25. The bread and the wine are, therefore, emblems, representing Christ's flesh and blood in a symbolic way, just as were his words about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. Jesus had said to those offended by his words, "For a fact, the bread that I shall give is my flesh in behalf of the life of the world." Joe 6. 51 This was given at his death as a sacrifice on the torture stake. His body was buried and was disposed of by his Father before it could see corruption. Act 2. 31 No one ever ate any of his flesh or blood, literally. Proper, orderly observance. The Christian congregation at Corinth had got into a bad spiritual state, in some respects, so that, as the Apostle Paul said, "Many among you are weak and sickly, and quite a few were sleeping in death. It was to great extent due to their misunderstanding of the Lord's evening meal and its significance. They were failing to respect the sacredness of the occasion. Some brought their supper with them to eat before or during the meeting. Among these were persons who overindulged and became intoxicated, while others in the congregation who had no supper were hungry and felt shamed in the presence of those who had much. With their minds drowsy or on other matters, they were not in condition to partake of the emblems with appreciation. Furthermore, there were divisions in the congregation over the fact that some in their midst favored Peter, others preferred Apollos, and yet others looked to Paul for leadership. 1 Co 1. 11-13. 11. 18. They were failing to appreciate that this occasion was one that should highlight unity. They did not have full realization of the seriousness of the matter, that the emblems represented the body and blood of the Lord, and that the meal was in memory of his death. Paul emphasized the grave danger to those who partook without discerning these facts. 1 Co 11. 20-34. Lo Rama lo Ru middle. How much he was